Hey, welcome back to the channel. Lots to cover in this week's video. We're going to talk about what happened in the real estate market in February. We're going to touch a little bit on what's happening with tariffs and how that's affecting the real estate market. And then we'll also talk about BC's budget and what sort of housing components are in it and what has been left out. Real quick, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to chat with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below or on screen, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, I hope you had a wonderful week. Let's jump right into it. February sales, we'll talk about Metro Vancouver first. Sales activity from a volume perspective was down just under 12% year over year. Now, if we look at the actual number of sales, we're just over 1,800 total sales, pretty much aligned exactly with what the market did in 2023. So we were down year over year, but pretty much went back to 2023 levels. Now, last year was a leap year. There was one extra day of sales, maybe 55, 65 more sales in that day. But regardless of how you look at it, sales were down. And big part of that was because inventory was up, now over 12,000 listings on the greater Vancouver side. So we saw listings kind of rise. I spoke about it in my last video. We really saw it rise as we went through the month. And so lots of options for buyers from the listing side of the equation. Fraser Valley, didn't fare as well, I guess you could say, from a sales perspective. They were down over 20% from the year prior, and they have also seen listings skyrocket. They're in the high 30% for listings growth year over year. So on both sides, you're basically seeing lots of choice for consumers, but very dependent on what sort of product type you're looking at. Definitely in the condo space, somewhat in the townhome space, but really still not a lot of good quality detached home listings. You're also seeing that on the Fraser Valley side. I know what you're probably most interested in is prices. Year over year on the Metro Vancouver side, detached homes pretty flat. Condos and townhomes down a little bit, 2 to 3%. Similar story on the Fraser Valley side, except detached homes down a little bit year over year, and then you saw that 2 to 3% drop on the condos and the townhomes year over year. If I were to give you an idea of what's happening in the market as we speak, activity-wise, showing-wise, still pretty active. Not as many offers floating around for sure. Definitely having more second showings, and then buyers changing their mind and saying, look, I want to wait it out. And a big reason for that, obviously, is every day you wake up, there's a new headline, new doom and gloom telling you how the economy is going to go in the tank, and now, the tariffs are on, and they're back on, and they're getting taken off the table. As I record this video on Thursday, the last headline that I read was that the tariffs may be extended another month. So, the only thing we can take from this scenario is to try not to pay attention to the headlines. And I need to take my own advice. I'm a news junkie. I like to read the news. It's hard for me because every, 3 or 4 hours, there's a new headline that's either very bleak or just very slightly positive that things may change. We may not have this sort of tariff scenario. The last thing they were talking about today is there may be an extension, but Canada basically saying, we're not taking the counter tariffs off the table anymore. We're not going to play this back and forth game. And realistically, markets are driven by sentiment. It's no different in the real estate market. Even when you pull out the investors out of the equation, which are largely out of the buying side of the equation, unless we're talking about land, people listen to headlines and they make decisions based on these headlines. The best advice I could give you, and I wish I had given myself over so many years, is to try and drown out the noise and really focus on my path, and is now the right time for me to make a decision. I know it's hard because uncertainty, and as humans, we crave stability. It's one of our biggest physiological needs, and we just don't have that right now. And so, people are kind of waiting to see what happens. We're seeing that reflected in the real estate market. Some properties, though, detached homes, well priced, that are attractive to both investors and end users. Those are still seeing multiple offers. Some condos are still seeing multiple offers if they are priced well, if they are priced to market. Some of the price drops that I've seen that aren't reflected in the data yet in terms of asking prices on some of these condos are extremely significant. I'm looking at some of these and I'm saying, for myself personally, I wish I had my capital not deployed right now, because I personally see, opportunity over the next 6 to 8 months. Am I saying that things are going to get much better and the market's going to skyrocket in 12 months? And that's why I would want to make a move in the next 6 months? Absolutely not. I've always talked about being a long-term investor or a long-term purchaser of real estate, and to look for those little opportunities to actually get into the market. But a lot of trepidation still, buyers are viewing, because I think they do want to get into the market when they have some more feeling of certainty in the market. I just mentioned a lot of these condos I'm seeing asking prices now come down significantly. I'm starting to also have more interactions with people about pain that they are experiencing in the market. Just the other day, 3 phone calls with people reached out to me. One of them, they have 4 properties right now, or a handful of properties, they said. All of them are bleeding. All of them are in the red. All are cash flow negative. They have to stop the bleeding soon. I had another call same day from someone who purchased, in a luxury presale, who's now making the decision of whether or not they have to walk away from, hundreds of thousands of dollars in deposits. And look, I know that these sorts of stories are not likely to garner, a lot of sympathy from people out there. But, at the same time, I think in many of these instances, definitely in my interactions, a lot of the times, this happens due to poor guidance, being given bad guidance, bad recommendations. And I can't fault anyone for trusting someone in a professional position, taking their professional advice and using that to make a decision, right? So it's, in my experience, it's never an instance when we talk about these investors and they bought pre-sales and now the market's down and a lot of people are happy about that. These were never purchased, at least, in my experiences, I can say, most amount of the time they're not purchased with bad intentions. Many times it's people that are trying to build a nest egg for themselves so their children can have a little something for when they're older, right? So they're just trying to set themselves forward. They're looking at an economy and an environment where we're ultimately getting taxed to death, and our services, however, are dropping and coming down. So, understanding that no one's going to look out for you but you. And so we have people that, were in a position to maybe purchase a second property. I'm not talking about people that went gangbusters and purchased a whole bunch of pre-sales and now they're stuck. That is a heavy speculator. But I think people that were just trying to build something for themselves, they are starting to feel the pain, and I'm starting to have more of those conversations. And my discussions with them is you're not alone. That's the first thing I tell them, is you're not alone. I realize that I have these conversations with people every single week, and they're picking up. There's a little bit more of it. There's a little bit more of it. But when I'm talking to people, they don't know there's other people that are in this exact same boat as them, right? So, this is happening right across the board. And I'm finding definitely in the condo space, those asking prices are really coming down. And basically what happens with these condo owners that have, for example, the vacant properties, is they reach a boiling point where they say, look, I'm going to lose money on this condo. I'm going to list it extremely low. If someone comes to me in the next 30 days to buy it, that's awesome. If not, I'm going to rent it. I'm going to wait for better days ahead. But there's a lot more sellers now that are thinking, look, I would rather just take a loss on this, sell it now, get some of my cash back so I can redeploy it. Perhaps they're seeing, opportunities in the market. Perhaps they just need to use it for something else. So those types of opportunities are opening up. When I did videos in previous months, I was talking very much about, that odd seller out of a bunch of sellers in a condo building. You'd have to find them for who's willing to sell at a loss. And I'm finding you don't have to look as hard now. you can look at that new building and there's going to be more and more people that are actually listing at more market values now. And so there's actually value out there for buyers and there's sellers being more reasonable. So having got that out of the way, I want to talk about the BC budget, which quietly got unveiled. I say quietly got unveiled. It was almost the perfect time for the provincial government to release the budget with all of the tariff talk. You barely saw any headlines or at least anyone talking about the budget, but we're going to talk about a couple housing components. Number one, the total budget deficit of 10.9 billion, the largest deficit ever, essentially. I think last year's was about 9 billion. So the deficit grows, and it's not that we're going to have all of this increased spending and any additional services. The budget is basically focused on maintaining core services. A lot of money, of course, going to healthcare like we need it to. But on the housing front, more money being put into the BC Builds program. BC Builds program was announced last year. Yeah, it would have been early last year. They announced that basically the provincial government were going to take underused land, whether that was owned by themselves or other government institutions or First Nations, whoever it might have been, and build rental housing that would go for middle income earners. And it was in an effort to keep middle income earners closer to where they work. So additional funding put into that. I want to say around 120, 130 million of additional funding being put into that. One of the pieces that wasn't in the budget was an election promise, was the BC provincial government. End of last year, the race was getting really tight, and they said, look, we're going to do essentially a 40% financing program for first-time buyers, where basically they would essentially purchase properties together with a first-time buyer, and 25 years down the road, if that buyer has not sold, they'd have to pay back with appreciation. They'd pay back the 40% plus appreciation on top, basically like a 60-40 sort of partnership. It was supposed to make it easier for first-time buyers to get in the market. They would have a lower down payment, but it's not in the budget, so it's not happening. Truthfully, when they announced the program, I didn't think it was a great program, but still, they said they were going to do it to help first-time buyers. They're not going to do it. There's no money for that. And look, I remember I said it at the time, and lots of people said at the time, the race was so close in the provincial election. Every day, either party was saying whatever they had to do to win. And this message is not party specific. I'm not saying one party did this, another party did that. They all do this. When they're close to winning, when the race is super tight, they're going to say that they're going to do things that they're ultimately not going to do, not going to be able to do. And this year's budget, it was, again, timely because of the tariffs. Even though the tariffs weren't really, built into this budget, they couldn't have actually had the time to actually put together this budget and think of the tariff implications when all of the tariff stuff is changing by the day. But it was a great guise. It was a great guise for the provincial government to say, given the uncertain times, we had to, scale back. So that program off the table. If you're wondering where they're going to get some of this money and how that might be tied to real estate, well, taxes are going up, and specifically the BC speculation and vacancy tax. For foreign owners, that's going to move from 2% of the assessed value to 3% as of next year. And for permanent residents, Canadian citizens, if you have a vacant property, that tax rate is going to move from 0.5% of assessed value to 1% of assessed value. It's going to be, I'm not surprised. First of all, I'll just say that there's going to be more taxes placed on the real estate sector. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens next year because, like I mentioned, a lot of people with condos, a lot of people with vacant condos, a lot of people are actually trying to sell and rent at the same time and also struggling to do either. So it's going to be a very dicey scenario as we move through this year. If I can give some sort of advice, like I mentioned off the top, as a buyer, if you can cancel out the noise. If you were thinking, okay, this is the year where I wanted to make a purchase, but now I'm getting hit with these headlines left and right. If it makes sense for you, and I don't know your personal situation, if it makes sense for you in terms of you feel comfortable in your employment, you feel like you're well protected, perhaps you have large savings or whatever it might be a good year, especially if you're looking, again, in the condo space. There's a lot of I believe there's a lot of opportunity out there. I did a video, might have been last one or the week before that, where I talk about a couple specific areas, but lots of opportunity there. And sellers, the way it works in this type of a market, maybe different if you are selling a detached home a little bit, is you need to price below the last sale. So typically what happens is when the market is rising, we will price a property a little bit higher than the last sale. So if I'm going to a listing appointment and we're in a hot market, the market is picking up, the last sale was at 500, comparable sale, then we're going to price a little bit more than that. We're going to price ahead for the growth. In this market, you can't look at the last sale and price ahead. You can't look at the last sale sometimes and even price at the same amount. You have to follow the trend of the market. And as a seller, you're probably thinking, I don't want to worry about all this. Your real estate agent should be worrying about all this and should come to you with a price that might be a little bit less than the last sale. It may not be what you want to hear, but you do not want to chase a market down and keep riding over top, because you're going to find yourself chasing and chasing and chasing a market. 6 months later, you're going to look back and say, wow, I should have just priced 1.5% below what I made my realtor list this property at, and because of that, now I'm selling for 5% less than that. So just make sure you're getting really good advice out there. Get multiple opinions out there as well. Don't just talk to one agent, talk to multiple agents. Get good advice, because so many things are happening in the market, yet not happening from a sales perspective, that it's really important that you seek professional guidance. So there you have it, guys. I hope you learned something in this video. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it to more people so they can also learn from it. And if you enjoy weekly real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's video. And lastly, again, if you're in Metro Vancouver or the Fraser Valley, you want to chat with me one-on-one about your real estate situation, you can book me for a free call, or you can just give me a call. Send me a text, shoot me an email, whatever's easiest for you. My contact info is below. But I want to thank you for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.